Good afternoon, everybody. This is David Cerns with Haley Marketing, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. So today it's my pleasure to introduce Kevin Turner and Tony D'Antonio. See, Tony, I knew I was going to stumble over that. So today's presentation is one that if you had asked me a few months ago, hey, do you want to have some guys from insurance and the staffing industry on the podcast? I'd go, or excuse me, on the webinar, I'd go, why would we want to do that? We're all about marketing. And then I learned more about what these guys do. And it's actually really cool. So we're going to take a bit of a deep dive into some data and analytics. And these guys are going to talk to you about something that everybody wants to know more of, is how do I improve margins? And they're going to show you some ways to run your business better based on the information you already have. So guys, take it away.
Thank you very much, David, for the introduction, and appreciate you and our friends at Haley Marketing inviting us to participate in this today. Kevin and I are definitely passionate about data and analytics, as well as all things insurance in the staffing industry. But I promise our audience we won't talk for a full hour about data and analytics. Although we have an hour, our goal is definitely to leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. Everybody will see that there is a function on GoToWebinar where you can put questions in the chat function. And at the end of the presentation, we will circle back and go through those questions. So hopefully we can have some good interactive dialogue at the end of this. But to start things off, Kevin, do you want to show the agenda? So to start things off, we'll just quickly hit the agenda of some of the things we want to talk about today. Obviously, we'll begin with the learning objectives, what we hope everybody walks out of here with after the end of our session today. Then we'll go right into the idea of data integrity. What kind of data does everybody today have at their fingertips and maybe either isn't using, doesn't know how to use, or doesn't know if it's accurate or not. So we'll talk a little bit about that before going into the different types of output that you get from your data. So what kind of analytics and reporting can you generate from that data? The difference between internal, external, and a couple of other areas we'll talk about. From there, we will circle back to, again, the idea that chances are everybody has some good amount of data at their fingertips. So we'll take you through how to use that data that you have and some concepts that some of our clients utilize with that data. And then from there, we take it to the exciting part. This is the advanced data usage, where we're going to share with you a few different ways that our clients utilize data in their organization of their staffing firm. This is definitely the area that a lot of sophisticated staffing companies are focused on, because just like every other area of your business, data is key in your business decision-making ability. So why not include that from an insurance risk management standpoint as well? And then again, we will conclude and, as I mentioned before, go into some questions and answers. So with that being said, if we want to take a look at the learning objectives, our primary goal today is really to help everybody understand the value of the data that they have from a risk management and workers' compensation standpoint. And also understand that everything that we're talking about today is achievable. There may be some areas that require some different setups and some different work on your end to get started, but all of this is very achievable, and all of this is techniques that, again, many staffing companies are using today. So with that being said, you'll see also put some, I guess, ideal state sample statements above as far as the objectives that you might have based off of your role within the company. I'm sure we've got owners of staffing companies on the line today. I'm sure we've got risk managers, as well as folks who are on the sales or operations side within a staffing firm. And just like all the other data that you've got in your company, when it comes to data associated with workers' comp and risk management, everybody's going to have a little bit of different relevance based off of that role that you've got in the company. But there is one commonality, and this is a question that we find ourselves asking more and more when we have some introductory client meetings. And that question is really, who within the staffing company ends up having responsibility or touching the risk management and insurance program? And as we're sitting around a boardroom, inevitably the risk manager is the first person to raise their hand, right? Makes sense. From there, you might have a couple claims people raise their hand, maybe a safety person raise their hand. But then as we wait them out and sometimes gently prod, you will eventually see everybody at that table, from the CFO, the COO, the owner of the company, sales and operational leads, raise their hand. Because as many of you know, really anything outside of a professional staffing company, everybody within the company has responsibility when it comes to workers' compensation and risk management. So this is one of those topics where, again, everybody's should be involved, although everybody should have a different perspective or different lens that they're taking to that data. So at the end of the day, if that is happening, really simply put, this kind of data and analytics puts you in a position to make better business decisions faster. And that's really the goal of having a data and analytics platform or program within your staffing company. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Kevin to get us started.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for joining. This is Kevin Turner. And Tony says that we love data, but really, I love data. So let's just get that on the record. What this slide is really going to talk about is what you can do to control and own your risk management data. What does that mean? Well, you have to have an awareness of what areas of your company and what areas outside of your company from a workers' compensation and risk management standpoint are you looking at. So clearly you have front office, employee name, customer name, branches, pay rates, gross margins, work comp burden, anything you're plugging in on the front office. Then the back office clearly ties to your front office, and most staffing firms are very good at that. You have your invoicing and you have your customer. And then payroll, that ties to the employee, and timesheets tie to customer and employee. So most staffing firms from a front office to back office standpoint have a pretty good handle of that piece of data. Obviously, you want to make sure that that data is entered correctly. Then let's go to the external influences of what data is coming in. You have what we call a first report of injury, which is when somebody gets hurt. There are situations where multiple people are touching these first report of injuries. It could go from an injured worker, and the injured worker could talk to a supervisor could talk to a branch, and then the branch can talk to corporate, and corporate could talk to the carrier. So it's touching 5 pieces, and the employee name, employee number, date of accident, customer location, all of those pieces of data are touching 5 points. So you want to make sure that that is a tight control point on collecting the appropriate data. And then that data goes into an insurance carrier loss run, which sometimes we've seen. Some people probably have seen it. You know what it is. But basically, an insurance carrier loss report is somebody gets hurt, and it's all the data associated with that injury, which could be an employee name, a date of accident, the location of the customer, what class code it was, the amount of loss associated with it. And then in conjunction with that, some staffing firms these days are insured with PEOs. Those PEOs have the same data and loss reports. But what we really look at is, and what we experience is, whether you're on Aviante, TempWorks, Bond, Bullhorn, QuickBooks, they all capture data differently, and they never really make it easy for you to collect the data in a way that will allow you to improve your business. Really, they're gathering the data to improve their business and make good business decisions based on your data. Every time I have a staffing firm send me a payroll report, they never can seem to get it in the Excel format that I like. It's like pulling teeth, and it's not the fault of the staffing firm. It's just the software companies like to try and keep that data in as a control point. Seeing your data in a raw state is extremely valuable, okay? And the same thing with insurance carriers. Carriers don't like to share raw data with you. They'd rather send you a PDF or a scanned copy of something. You need to push your carrier or your PEO to provide you the data in the format so you can use it and operate it to operate your risk program effectively, okay? And then lastly, as far as like data integrity, I used Kmart as a good example. Kmart, you know, when somebody enters into the system, you can enter capital K and M-A-R-T. You can enter capital K dash M-A-R-T or a lowercase k-M-A-R-T. Everyone has the freedom to enter something differently. And the problem is, from a data standpoint, now you have 3 Kmarts and the data will not speak to each other. And I think I have, do I have a poll question here? Or maybe it's, no, we're not there yet. So just to, if you want to plug in the chat, if you were going to rate your data integrity from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 obviously being the best, where would you rank yourself? Feel free to throw it in the chat if you'd like to. We'll take a look at it. But at the end of the day is, you know, and you've probably heard it a million times, garbage data going in, garbage out. Flawed data input produces flawed output data. So before you do anything, that has to be secure. So next slide. So now that you kind of have the data, how do you measure it? What's important? Here's the poll question, and I'm gonna post that poll question right now. I'm gonna select that and launch it. You know, who here is measuring anything other than dollars associated with work comp losses? I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's probably pretty important to see what kind of dollar value is associated with the losses that you have. But that's not the only thing you can measure, okay? But if you can measure it, you can improve it. And you clearly can improve upon the amount of dollars you have in losses. The data points you see here, work comp losses, indemnity, branch, region, zip code, all of those are very objective, very easily controllable data points. And the chances are you have a bulk of these data points readily available at your fingertips. But I would bet you generally, for the most part, look at the dollars and cents. Who wouldn't, right? So I'll just give you a couple stories associated with these data points. One time we had a client that did a comparison of pay rate to workers' comp losses and saw a correlation between pay rate and the amount of losses that they had. The lower pay rates associated with certain clients led to, one, smaller margin percentages because it's a lower pay rate and a smaller total margin. And what was happening was those were also driving work comp losses. So your least profitable clients were also driving your highest rate of workers' compensation losses, which Tony will tie into later, which will easily diminish the amount of gross margin that you have. Secondarily, you know, something as weird as day sales outstanding, DSO. If you can draw a correlation between your slow payers, and you know who your slow payers are, and you can identify them, and you can say, okay, Joe's Manufacturing is a slow payer, and guess what? Man, he's not a good work comp performer either. Maybe you can draw some correlation and maybe throw more resources at day sales outstanding. So what I'm saying is all these data points right here are within your control. And let's see the, okay, we've got pretty good 59-41 split. 44 people say no, 56 people say yes, they are measuring something other than workers' compensation dollar value. So actually a pretty good number. It's ticking up to 57%, but it's good to see that people are looking at other things associated with that. Probably have a lot of risk managers on this call. The next slide is the hard part. So we're going to talk about strategies to make the data relevant. Raw data can be very daunting. Once you look at it in its raw state, you'll get an idea of the scope and scale of what needs to be done. You may need to integrate multiple sources. Maybe you shop your insurance every year. We don't recommend that, but maybe you do it. That's the way you want to do it. And you have 5 different insurance carriers, and you have 5 different data sets you have to pull in. You're going to have to position accordingly to get that data in the format you want. Maybe on the front office, back office side, on the back office side, you were in QuickBooks for a long time, and you switched to a system where you had front office and back office. And once again, the change that you're making, you're adding an entire new set of data that is structured very differently. So,
hey, Kevin,
yeah.
just to jump in, can you close the poll so that folks can see the slides again? We're getting some feedback.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, I don't. Okay, close this. Okay, great. 60% it ended up as. I apologize. There you go. So didn't know that was showing. It didn't show me that was showing. So my apologies. So, and by the way, this is not the most exciting slide. You didn't miss much. So basically what we're looking at is different data sets, integrating multiple sources, and then making it usable. What does that mean? In order to make it usable, you have to figure out some kind of consistent naming conventions for your sets of data across various platforms. We kind of recommend pulling in a data expert to assist you in that process. And that wouldn't take that long, and it wouldn't cost you a lot of money. And then you can build a process internally once they kind of train you on what data and how to use it to get that data in the format you want. So you can put a process together and do that internally, or simply outsource it to someone on like a monthly or quarterly basis so you can have the data that you need at your fingertips. Okay, so that is a quick down and dirty on getting your data sets to a point where it can be usable. Now, what Tony's going to do is on the next agenda item, he's going to show you how to use that data for kind of internal and external comparisons.
Yeah, so Kevin just took us through some tips and tricks on how you can improve your data integrity as step 1, while additionally hopefully showing you some data that you actually already have at your fingertips. So let's just fast forward and imagine that our data is cleaned up, it's structured the right way, it's up and running, and we're good to go. The hard part is out of the way, and we're moving forward. So I'm going to talk about some different types of output now. And, you know, as you can see here, all these different things are output. And again, as I mentioned before, it's really dependent upon your role within the organization as to what output is valuable for you. So at the highest level, you know, some good examples are CFO. You know, CFO is probably looking to see some kind of monthly report that shows the workers' compensation losses under the deductible each month. A risk manager at the highest level is looking for, you know, those dollars, trends of types of injuries, as well as maybe making sure that claims are going from open to closed. While an owner at the highest level really just wants to know, is workers' compensation improving our gross profit, or is it cutting into our gross profit, right? So at the highest level, that's really the kind of reporting that you want to make sure is taking place before getting into some additional layers here. KPI and goal setting internally is probably the best place to start. So just like anywhere else in the business, again, if it's something you can measure, it's something you can improve upon. So when you look at your risk management program and you see different things like average cost per claim, medical versus indemnity claims, lag times, if you can go ahead and understand where you are at today from a KPI standpoint, then you can set a goal to attack it. And that's very much useful when you're talking about a workers' compensation program and trying to understand, is my program going in the right direction or not? So that's certainly one of the starting points I would suggest, is set KPIs and goals associated with them. In addition to KPIs and goals, benchmarking is also a powerful use of data, and we've got all different types of benchmarking, right? So within a staffing firm, some common internal benchmarks are branch 1 against branch 2. How is each branch performing against the other branches? And within the use of that data, when you can see that one's not performing as well as the other, then it gives you the opportunity to drill down, right? Is it a recruiter who maybe isn't as skilled in job matching in branch 2, right? Where the candidates should never be put into the job descriptions that are being paired up there. And that's what's leading to higher workers' compensation claims. It really does give you the ability to not necessarily have the answer, but it gives you the ability to figure out where to drill down when you start internally benchmarking. Obviously, besides at the branch level, you want to do the same at the client level. You want to understand, which clients are driving profitability against others, and make sure that you can compare and contrast those margins that you have in place to figure out where more resources, more energy should be spent. You want to focus on those customers that are bringing you the greatest rate of return. When we talk about external benchmarking, this is something that every staffing owner I've ever met wants. Everybody wants to know, are they better than their peers? And what do they have to do to become the best, if not? So everything like experience mods, cost of workers' compensation on a percentage of payroll or percentage of revenue, how much cyber liability limits should I be purchasing? Is the $5 million that I'm being told by my client a standard or not? So all different kinds of things that staffing owners would love to benchmark externally amongst their peers. The problem with external benchmarking is it's hard to get some of that data, right? We've got publicly traded staffing firms where you'll be able to get some of that data. We've got our friends at ASA and Staffing Industry Analysts who do a great job in publishing some data. But to a large degree, there's a lot of that data that never sees the light of day. So I would encourage you to rely on your consultants and advisors who specialize in the staffing space as a great way to get some external benchmarking in place, as well as some trade associations. There's a couple of different really good trade associations in the staffing world where they tend to be really good about helping people benchmark against each other. So next slide. When we talk about benchmarking, there's so many different data points that you can compare performance against. This is just a quick list of some of those different areas. And again, externally, this can be very difficult to grab. Internally, this is all pieces of your program that you should be looking at and comparing and contrasting. I know there's so we put out an annual benchmark report of the staffing industry, which we'll give you a link at the end of the presentation where you can go and download it for free. We benchmark our entire book of business, which consists of over 150 staffing firms, and the data that's included in that benchmark report is over 10 years of data being compiled. So again, it's one of those things where it exists out there externally. You just have to know where to find it. So hopefully that's something that all of you can take advantage of as a result of attending this webinar. Kevin, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Tony. So you may be saying to yourself, I'm a small staffing firm. I mean, I'm not going to do all this deep dive into all this stuff. I can eyeball it and get a good idea of where my losses are impacting my clients or my branches. I don't need all this stuff. And, to a certain extent, you're right. However, there are things that you can do in a simple way, and internal indicators that you can use to allow yourself to get an idea of how you're performing over time. Like a month over month, trailing 12 months look at certain KPIs that you can set for yourself in order to hold your internal risk managers, your claim people accountable to something. Okay, and the reason you have this accountability is most staffing firms, look, you have limited resources and you have limited money available to allocate resources to risk, and you want to take that money and take that time and make it as effective as possible. So these sample KPIs are listed here. I'm going to show on the next slide kind of a basic dashboard of data that you can get from any of your insurance brokers, consultants, your carriers, and you just have to put a little work into it and allow yourself to kind of get these KPIs. They're going to evolve over time. You'll be able to judge your performance and hold people accountable to performance as you become more aware of where your baseline for top level performance is amongst your company. This list is not all inclusive. However, through our experience, these are data points that we have found to be most relevant. So let's take a look at the basic dashboard report on this next slide. This is a very busy slide. So what I did here was I just circled some things. It's a little difficult to see, but I want your eyes to focus to the green circle. The green circle is basically time range. Okay, so this report is a 1 year look back. Okay, it's the trailing 12 months. So this report would come out and it would be, you may not be able to see it, it says April 30th of 2019. The data that we're pulling is 1 year worth of data that goes back to May 1st of 2018. So this is a trailing 12-month look back of how you're doing compared to the KPIs that you've set. Okay, so that just kind of gives you an idea. You're looking backwards 12 months to see where you stand. And then the yellow section is that one section where operations, risk, and owner can take a quick look to see based on the KPIs that you have set. And once again, you can set the KPIs any way you want. These listed here are the ones we have found to be the most relevant. Average cost per claim, average lag days, percent reported under 3 days, percentage indemnity, percentage over 10,000, and percentage closed. The average cost per claim, that is going to be a very, very subjective thing depending on the type of business that you do, where you do business. California compared to Indiana, that number is going to be completely different. California is going to be much higher as an average cost per claim than Indiana. So you'll be able to set that benchmark for yourself. And it starts to creep up, you're going to want to look a little deeper. Average lag days. Lag days is an important thing. Most people in risk understand this. The longer it takes to report a claim, the higher the dollar value of the claim is going to be. So there is a correlation. They set the benchmark for under 5 days. Their average is 6.1. Okay, why is that happening? Okay, pretty simple to understand. The percentage reported under 3 days is only 57%. So there's a large percentage of claims that are actually being reported in 4 to 7 days. Okay, so maybe there is a lag. We don't know where the lag is. Maybe it's something you want to look into to get that percentage reported, claims reported under 3 days, to about better than 80%, which is a nice benchmark. And then we have percentage of indemnity. To go a little quicker here, I just want to make sure we're conscious of time. Indemnity claims are more expensive. Okay, people are out of work. You're not only paying medical, now you're paying wages or lost wages to an employee. You want to keep your percentage of indemnity as low as humanly possible. Now, you could make some internal decisions in your company where you're not reporting every claim because your state has some benefits associated with self-paying and not reporting claims. That's going to drive your percentage of indemnity higher. Okay, that less than 11% might not be your benchmark. Maybe you can set your own benchmark. Okay, and then percentage of claims over $10,000. It could be over 10,000. You could set it at 15. You could set it at 5. But in this instance, this client, as a sample client, wanted to keep it under 7%. Okay, the percentage of claims over 10,000 is 15%. Double what the margin. What's going on? Maybe we need to take a deeper look. And then lastly, the percentage closed. What is that telling you? It's basically telling you that you're driving claims to closure. You're getting people back to work. You're getting them off your loss run. They're not sitting at home, and those claims are done. They're not going to grow anymore. And you can kind of, rest assured that the numbers associated with your loss runs are going to stay consistent. So the goal for this client is to be a greater than 80% percentage closed. They're at 70%, not bad, still not hitting their benchmark. Okay, I highlighted the little red section. It's going to be very tough to see. And this is just one little tidbit on this chart where this could be a red flag. You can see here that for this client, you can see it says struck by or against and total incurred losses over the year for $230,000. Exertion, straining yourself, that's at $270,000. Okay? That information, you could take action with that and say, why are we getting so many struck by or struck against claims? Maybe you're going into a lot of new facilities, or maybe your temps need to be trained a little better in navigating their work site, or be trained a little better on where to stand, where not to stand, things like that. And exertion is just like that. You know what? Maybe better training on pushing and pulling, how to appropriately do that, how not to do a job function that supervisor asked you to do, because one, it's not within your job description. So just little things that you could take on a monthly dashboard basis to say, okay, we need to allocate the limited resources that we have to this. So this is a basic thing that every staffing firm can do. Okay, which, after this, what we're going to do is we're going to tie some of this data to trending, which goes a little deeper into a longer look back of how your data looks. Okay, now this is the fun stuff. Tony gets to do it. I'm sad that I don't get to do it.
Yeah, so Kevin just walked you through some examples of the types of reports you should all have at your fingertips, and what those reports should tell you about your performance. And you're probably sitting there saying, yeah, I get it. Inherently, the better my workers' compensation program is, the better margins my company is going to be having in place. When are we going to really start to get talking about this margin stuff? Because that's what got my attention. Well, this is the slide where we start to do that. So we're gonna take a look at this report, or sample report here that we're looking at, is a 3-year culmination of client level, branch level, and region level activity. And you can see, to have a little fun here, we used my kids' names, Kevin's kids' names, within our COVID quarantine environment, backyard basement. Any of you guys who have kids in the house during this time know our pain and our joy all at the same time that we're experiencing. So we thought we'd have a little fun and include those as our sample customers and branches today. But if we take a look at this graph here, you can see it's color coded, and you can see that there's 2 lines of information. So when we talk about the blue atop the Luke customer, Tony's backyard branch set of data, it extends from that top set of information to the bottom. So hopefully that allows you to follow along in what we're talking about here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to look at a couple of examples here, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we'll start right in the middle here at the toddler region, Kevin's basement, with Riley as the customer. When we look at this, you can see that the amount of billing for this customer has been $6 million and change over the last 3 years. You can also see that the premiums from the financials or essentially what was accrued for workers' compensation premium, was $138,000 over that 3-year period. When you jump down to the bottom line, you can see that we actually only had 33,000 of total incurred losses against our premium of 138,000. So the gross profit dollars that we're showing for this customer of $818,000, actually went up, because what we allocated, what we accrued for from a workers' compensation standpoint, didn't come close to coming true. So congratulations. The Riley customer ended up being a very profitable client for you over a 3-year span. So let's take a look at the next situation. And if we look at the preschool region, Kevin's backyard, Riley, we see that this customer in a different region, in a different branch, has operated or performed very differently for some reason. Maybe that is due to a different on-site management at the client level. Maybe that's due to a highly legal environment where this office is located. Whatever the reason is, clearly this customer has performed very differently at this location. So over the 3-year period, we've come close from a billing standpoint of billing $5.7 million, so pretty close to what we billed at the other location. And that $5.7 million resulted in $722,000 of gross profit dollars, which equals 13% gross profit. So nice gross profits from a light industrial staffing perspective. But what happens when we look deeper into the workers' compensation performance is you can see that we accrued for $223,000 of premium, which contemplated what we thought we would have in losses. But all of a sudden, we actually had $294,000 of losses. So this client that we thought was generating $722,000 of gross profit dollars has suddenly knocked that down to about $650,000 and has taken that percentage from 13% down to 11%. So you find yourself in a situation where you're not making as much money as you thought you were making with your client. And let's pretend for a second that this isn't the first time as the owner of this company that you're seeing this, but instead we're kind of following best practices and we're sitting down monthly going through this report, and we're having good dialogue not only with my risk manager but with my operations team, and we are understanding the impact of what's happening at this client level every 30 days. So we've got real-time ability to make change. What would typically be happening in this situation, if that was the case, is maybe our risk manager suggests that we send some loss control help out to this location, right? Maybe it's, hey, those exertion claims that Kevin pointed to on that previous slide, I think that they've got some issues in the way that they're lifting their material, and let's just get some refreshed training from that loss control professional on lifting techniques, and I think we can rehab this client. I think we can bring the profitability back up to where we expect it to be. Okay, makes good sense. Let's monitor what happens as a result of that training, and 3 months afterwards, if we don't see results of X, we'll revisit our discussion. So that's a very specific example of how in real time we could have done something about this client to hopefully protect our margin. The other thing that is important when it comes to the sales folks in the organization is what happens if, unbeknownst to the owner, because they're all busy doing their thing, the salesperson who's responsible for this client is renegotiating your current contract. And instead of keeping your rate flat, the salesperson actually agrees to a small decrease in your rate. That salesperson probably wouldn't agree to that if they had this kind of information at their fingertips. If they had access to information that told them we're actually losing money here, there's no way they would agree to a rate decrease. So what this does give you, and what it gives your sales force, is it gives you a very logical and supportive way of discussing any kind of potential rate increase with your client, and going to them and saying, hey, love you, client, but the reality is I have lost money by servicing you over the last 3 years. And in our next example, we'll talk about another real life scenario of taking action with data. And that is the Hudson example. So when we look at Hudson as a customer, again, same drill here, $2.1 million being billed over the last 3 years, 277,000 of gross profit dollars as a result, 13% gross profit percentage. All sounds really good. We only accrued for $68,000 of premium for Hudson over 3 years. And in reality, there was $413,000 of losses. And just looking at that claim count, I would assume it wasn't just one big claim that led to that 413. Chances are there were probably a couple of different significant claims in there that led to that. And what kind of situation does the staffing owner find him or herself in now? Well, all of a sudden that $277,000 of gross profit dollars, all of that and then some become eroded by the $344,000 that we're short from a workers' comp standpoint, leaving you in a position of being in a negative position. Essentially, you lost money by servicing this client over the last 3 years. You didn't even work for free. You just lost money, which obviously is the worst case scenario to be in. So the last very real example of action being taken from real-time data and analytics is your ability to fire a client before it ever gets this bad, right? And there's no way, unfortunately, what we see is staffing firms who aren't looking at this stuff on a regular basis, all too often, they end up walking away from that client when it's too late. They've already got stung, and they've already got stung to a point that it's really hard to recover. So hopefully, these examples give you some real good insight into the way that this is usable. The last thing I'll mention before turning this back over to Kevin is the data in here is super important. Equally as important is the communication that goes with this data, right? So again, going back to what we started with, this isn't data that should just go and live in the risk manager's world. This is data that that risk managers should be facilitating high-level communication to the C-suite at a global level, should also be facilitating communication out to the operations folks so that they understand how they can work with their clients who are problematic. And again, keep those salespeople in the loop as to what's happening so that they don't sign a contract that they regret. So, Kevin, turn it back over to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Tony. It's a great example of using data to make actionable decisions. The next two slides I'm going to walk through pretty quickly. And these slides are really kind of drilled down to keeping the reports to an ownership level, keeping them very simple, okay? It takes a lot of data to get to these reports, but what these reports are going to do is going to show certain trends that are going on in your business. And what we're really doing here is we're normalizing them to hours worked. Hours worked is what it is. It's 1 hour is 1 hour. There's no margins built in there. There's no markups built in there. It's literally just how many hours have you worked and how are we performing from a risk perspective based on the hours we worked. So this slide basically shows you that you have some real consistency as far as claims for 100 full-time employees by branch, except we have a real anomaly here. What is that? Who knows? Okay. Maybe as an owner, you know, maybe as an owner, you don't. But if you see something like this, you're going to kind of look and go, okay, I need to call somebody and figure out what happened here. And maybe that branch had literally just opened up an on-site at a very, very new facility. And generally, new facilities, although you may think that a new facility is actually very, very clean and very, very safe, what happens is nobody is familiar with the surroundings, whether they're a temp or whether they're a worker. So what you may see there is a huge, huge uptick in, excuse me, in incidences at that branch level because they started a new on-site, drove a lot of business and a lot of activity. But if you normalize it, they're having a ton of claims at that location. Okay, but that may not be a bad thing, because as time goes on, there's more familiarity with that location. And as an owner, I can say, okay, I know, I talked to that branch, everything looks good. I feel that that number is going to go down. The flip side of that is maybe it's not a new facility. Maybe you hired a new branch manager and that new branch manager is going rogue, writing anything and anything under the sun, going and doing roofing, going and doing lines of business that you didn't want them to do, and you need to rein that person in. Okay, that could be it as well. So from an ownership level, I'm looking at this going, okay, everything seems pretty consistent, but ooh, I gotta figure out what's going on at that branch that is clearly skewing my numbers. All right, and then you go to the next one, and let's just, for argument's sake, say this trend is for a month in 2020. Okay, and we go to the next slide. Now, this slide can tell you here, from an ownership perspective, once again, this is claims per 100 full-time equivalents. Okay, and 1 represents January all the way through 12, which is December. What this tells you is, okay, things have not gone completely off the rails in 2020. As you can see, 2020 is the red, 2019 is the orange, 2018, 2017. It's been pretty consistent year over year, okay? And you can see every year there seems to be a little bit of an uptick in January, but over time, everything stays consistent within that 3 to 4.5 claims per full-time employee. And the 2020 number is a little skewed. However, maybe in 2020, ownership did know, because they've been tracking their data all this time, and they understand from 2017, 18, and 19, when they bring on a new on-site at a new facility, that they're going to have an uptick in claims. But they're not concerned about it because they know it will normalize over time. Because you can see in 2020, you know what? They've had an uptick. They're not performing as well as they have in the past, but maybe it was only because they had a huge on-site at a location that skewed their numbers to a little bit higher than they normally have. So because they've learned something in the past, they have learned to expect an uptick, and they're realizing from an ownership perspective, things are not going off the rails. We don't have to go crazy. Maybe we just need to allocate resources in a different manner. So that kind of concludes like the different reports that you can see. And by the way, these are snapshots of reports that we can have. You can get thousands of reports. These are small snippets of what you can do with the data that's available to you out there. And now I'm going to kick it back to Tony just to conclude everything.
Sure. So, hopefully everybody found today's presentation of value. I think that, when we're wrapping this up here, really, as we stated to begin, getting yourself started down the path of data management is the hardest part. Putting in the time and effort and energy to get everything right is where you certainly make an investment, but the return on that investment is significant, and that is what the best-in-class staffing firms are seeing right now from that investment. definitely lean on your advisors and your other, trusted vendor partners to assist you in getting successful in this area of the business, because it is worthwhile. And we talked about this a little bit, that if you're working with a PEO, I know a lot of our PEO partners that we work with, they do provide some level of this. So if you're not getting it from a PEO, then make sure you're asking the question, because some of them definitely have the ability to provide it. And workers' compensation as your number 2 expense, obviously you want to measure it and manage it. Something that large, you can't just let it run on its own. In today's world of big data, it's becoming more and more crucial to be able to implement this in the company if it's not already there. And I think most importantly, again, data and analytics, what it can provide is that real-time ability to make business decisions that will protect your margin and will also increase awareness of areas where your margin is exposed to erosion. So without that real-time usage, all too often you find yourself kind of too late to the party. So, and lastly, I mentioned before, you can click on our website and the staffing landing page of the Odell Studner website and download your benchmark report for free. And you can start that kind of internal benchmarking exercise that we talked about. If you run into any questions, just give us a holler. We'd be happy to help you out. Do we have any questions that have hit the chat?
So far, nothing coming in, guys, but a couple of questions that I've got for you. And thank you very much. Lots of really good, detailed information. But I assume to a lot of people who are in the staffing industry who did not come up on the risk management side, did not come out of accounting, but came out of sales or recruiting, your eyes start to glaze over when you see all these numbers. How do companies like yours, how do the ATSs, how do they make it easier to collect this data?
Kevin, you want me to take that, or you want to take it?
You can take it, and I'll piggyback off you if you want.
Sure. So, the good news is within the staffing world, you've got, a very short list of software providers that the majority of staffing companies are utilizing. And speaking, for us at this point, when we approach one of those firms to assist our customer, we've already been there and done that with a software company. So they're not really recreating the wheel every time a staffing client wants to get something like this up and running. We simply reference, hey, you did this same thing for XYZ client a couple months ago. Now this client would like to start receiving reports in that fashion. So lots of times they can kind of, rinse and repeat the same format of data that is being generated out of that software system, and then use it from there.
And then David, on the insurance carrier side, I'll just jump in. If you're with a carrier for a long time, you're held captive to what data that their system can collect. But a lot of times these carrier systems, they have fields that are not being used. They don't use their software, their claim software to its fullest extent. And if given the opportunity and paying attention, you could utilize their claim system to plug in data that you want to capture, but you have to do it up front. Some carriers are willing to do that, some carriers are not. It's just a matter of what you can get done. And once again, you just lean on your advisor to press their carrier partners to get the data that you need in the format that you want.
Thanks, Captain. Thanks, Tony. And in the last section, Captain, you kind of showed the difference between like the one-time anomaly of a lot of claims and then looking at the long-term trends. Let's say you're a staffing company, you've got a handful of good clients, and you start to see a concerning trend in claims. What's the right point to sit down with the client and bring that up and discuss how to either improve the work environment or start talking about having to terminate the relationship?
Yeah, I can jump in and take this one to start. So lots of our clients have very good best practices about frequent conversation with their clients on a scheduled basis, right? So whether that's monthly, quarterly, whatever, they're already coming in and setting formal dialogue with that client. So the ability to get access to this data on a regular basis, like we talked about every 30 days, means that you don't miss that opportunity to bring this up on those regularly scheduled meetings. And it doesn't ever start out as we've got trouble here, right? It always starts out as, hey, we're partners here, and we've noticed a trend with our temporary employees. I'm sure you're noticing a similar trend with your internal employees. We'd love to bring some safety resources to the table on behalf of both our employees as well as your employees, right? So it becomes that safety partnership that hopefully, is addressed ahead of time with the client before you sign a contract. But when you're having regular dialogue and you bring it up in a partnership kind of way, it can be a win-win not only for you, but the client's employees as well. 'Cause again, chances are they're experiencing similar things that your employees are.
Yeah, because that's the role of a real partner. That's excellent. And one last question, guys. Where people who want to better manage their insurance, what's the best place to get a hold of the two of you?
So we're both on LinkedIn, and you also will see our profiles on that Odell Studner website. Be happy to help anybody who has any questions, whether that's an email or a phone call to us. We are here to talk anything that you would like to about staffing, insurance, and data and analytics.
I heard a rumor there's some discussion about golf too, right, Kevin?
Of course, there was discussion about golf. I don't talk about that on the golf course. Let's just be honest. But yeah, if you want to reach us, always happy to talk. Obviously, we've been in this space a long time, and the real power in what we've trained ourselves to do is really just ask questions to staffing firms and owners and on what their expectations are and what they're trying to accomplish. If we can get a handle on that, then we can kind of really pivot to a different discussion about not just peddling insurance, but really just where you want to take your company and how we can get you set up with data and analytics to allow them to have those conversations with their clients, like Tony was mentioning. But secondarily, if their clients change their spots, and with this information in their hand, if your client runs into a bad situation financially and they aren't a good partner, you want to catch that pretty quickly, and that's the goal. That's what we try and accomplish. So thanks everyone for listening in and hanging in there for this topic. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Lots of interesting information. Really kind of highlights how this number 2 cost in a staffing company isn't just an expense. It's an opportunity to improve customer relationships. It's an opportunity to drive revenue. It's an opportunity to ensure you're working with the right clients. So thank you both very much. Really enjoyed today's presentation. Hope everybody else did. As you can see on screen, we've got a couple of other events coming up this month. So both of them next week. On Tuesday, we're going to be doing a product demo webinar looking at branded content. So looking at ways to use content to help your company stand out both in sales and recruiting. And then we're going to wrap up our February educational content with a lunch with Haley next Thursday, all about building your marketing stack. So everybody in staffing has heard about tech stacks. We're going to show you what a marketing stack is all about. From all of us at Haley Marketing, thank you so much for being part of today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Lunch with Haley event.